everyone. So we're back with another list. Today is 9 commonly overlooked costs from funeralbasics.org. We love funeralbasics.org. A lot of great articles there. This one I think is really important, even if one of them is something for you to remember down the line. It's great to have 9 things. That way we can help you point out a couple that maybe you forget along the way, or maybe you don't factor into the costs. You know, when you look at costs for funerals, people say, oh, the average funeral is 10, 20, whatever thousands of dollars for a funeral. That doesn't just mean the funeral home costs. There are all these other things that factor in. And I want you to be prepared for all these other add-ons that are outside of the funeral home that the funeral home may put on their bill for you, just to consolidate the different places you have to pay out. So number one is death certificates. So many people believe you automatically get so many death certificates, but you will need to purchase the amount that you would like. The funeral home is going to charge you whatever the county clerk's office charges you. In Michigan, it's like, let's say $20 for the first, 5 for each additional. Each county is different, but the first is always more than the ones that come after it each time you go in. That cost is going to be the same whether you get them from the funeral home or whether you get them from the county clerk. Some funeral homes may include so many copies built into their costs already. A little bit of a gray area. And how many you're going to need is also a little gray area. Sometimes a certified is required, sometimes not. At a bank, one teller may keep your original, one may make a copy and give you back your certified. It's not a tried and true, this is exactly how it's done scenario everywhere you go. You may call the phone company. They may want one fax. They may want an original sent. Same with insurance. So it's hard to tell you exactly how many you're going to need, but we can guide you to an approximate number. Now, if you have those helpful people telling you what happened when their loved one died, take the advice with a grain of salt, because it doesn't mean that it's going to be the same for your loved one. Each county sets their own costs, and there is a fee. Number 2 is cemetery and monument charges. So when you hear numbers of how much the funeral is, often it's the funeral home charges and the cemetery fees, which are outside of the funeral home. And depending on the cemetery, this can be $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 that goes on the funeral bill, but is not a funeral home charge. So even when you have the right to be buried on a lot and you own that right, you don't actually own the ground. You have the right to be buried there. You must still pay for the opening and closing of that space. So you purchase the right to be buried there, and later you pay for the opening and closing. Additionally, you're probably going to want a headstone or marker of some type, and you'll need to purchase that along with a foundation, which is that concrete that's poured in the ground so that that monument doesn't sink down in the ground over time, or if it's a flat one, that sets down into so that it is secured. If you receive a government marker at no cost, you still need to pay for it to be installed at the cemetery. So there is still a cost for the installation. Number 3, obituary and death notices. You don't have to, by law, put it in the paper just because. And as Funeral Basics says, many people are surprised at the costs associated with publishing an obituary or death notice in a paper, especially in a larger city. So in most cases, the funeral home will publish an obituary to the funeral home's website. But if you wish to post it elsewhere, the fee may be far higher than you realize. Our local paper where I am is around $4.50 for a very modest obituary. And that is a one-run, one-day posting in print. You go to the New York Times or something, we're talking $20,000 for a one-run obituary. So don't be surprised by the cost of running in the newspaper. I always say, think of an advertisement to sell your car, which is this big, and that's like $50 to $100. So think of then the space it would take to do an obituary. It is an advertisement of sort. They're going to charge for it. It's a newspaper. You pay for space, regardless of what the space is for. Now, number 4 is your church or venue charges. This is something I hear a lot. Well, we're members of the church, so they're not going to charge us. Come on, guys. Just because you're a church member does not mean there are not going to be fees at the church. You may be able to use the space at no charge, but you're going to have honorariums for the clergy, the organist, the singers, the custodian, the tech team, the sound person, the funeral coordinator, and more. The luncheon, all of it. People take days off work to be there. They need to be compensated. Clergy spends hours preparing a service, then hours the day of the service to be there. Churches are often shy about conveying these costs to the family, but they come back around to the funeral home and expect payment. So these are fees to factor in. And no matter how long you've tithed, no matter how long you've been at the church, more than likely, there's always an exception, there are going to be some costs, some honorariums for being at the church. Number 5 is specialty music. So we all love Spotify, but sometimes you want a soloist or an instrumental music. People that come for this service to sing or play will need to be compensated. This is going to be between $50 to $500, and they may have a set price for their own that they want, just like the honorariums at the church. They're going to have a set price for coming and playing, just as if they were going to go to a wedding and play. They're not going to donate their services to a wedding. They're not going to donate to the funeral typically. So they need to be compensated for being there. Asking, what is your fee? And if they say, oh, whatever you feel like, just remember the time that it took for them to practice for this event, to take time possibly off work to be there, and to, be there to support you during that time. And you want to recognize that. It doesn't even just have to be monetarily. You can always, if they are a good friend, get them a gift card to a restaurant. At least acknowledge with a thank you note if they're a good friend. Thank them for being part of this special event for your loved one. Number 6, the efficient honorarium. Again, you're going to need to compensate those who participate in the service. So if it's somebody at the funeral home, they've brought in some type of a celebrant, or you have a friend who has said, oh, I can help do that service, you're going to want to give them something. A clergy or celebrant will spend hours preparing for the service, and that time's valuable and worth something. Many will set their own fees. Some work on a donation again. Expect around $300 on average, if not more or less. Flowers. Now, the oldest funeral tradition is flowers, and they are pricey if you have not bought or shot flowers lately. They're beautiful. They can be enjoyed by the family or left at a grave, but some families don't want the reminders at home and will donate flowers to a local nursing home or hospice center. This is an additional cost, and you may have to go purchase them at the florist yourself. Some funeral homes do sell them through the funeral home. They may have books, catalogs for you to look at. They get included on the funeral bill. Sometimes they direct you to go to the florist yourself. I work at a funeral home. That is the case. I always tell family, it is the most failed thing that we can do because it's a terrible game of telephone where you tell me what you want, I tell the florist what you want, something shows up and you're disappointed because it's not what your vision was. So the most direct route to convey your vision is you directly to the florist. You're gonna be much more successful. So we encourage that path when it comes to ordering flowers, but that can be put on the funeral bill. It's an outside charge from the funeral home. Pallbearers. Funeralbasics.org also brings up a point many may not be aware of is an option. And in many cases, pallbearers are family and friends. However, for some, it's difficult to find 6 to 8 pallbearers who are fully able to carry that casket any distance. If you require assistance with pallbearers, the funeral home can help you hire needed people depending on the area you're in. There's pallbearer services in some larger cities to bring in a team to carry the casket, especially if you want that whole look of them putting it on their shoulders and doing it a specific way. The funeral home may also have to bring in additional staff to help with that position. If they're paying out more, expect that you may have to pay out more as well. It's not something just to assume that the funeral home is going to bring in 7 additional staff members or 6 additional staff members to act as pallbearers the day of the service and you not have an additional fee. Now, the last one is police escorts. I have never seen this in Michigan where you hire a police escort, at least not anywhere in the area I'm in. But my grandparents were from Minnesota, Twin City area, and every funeral we've gone back to in the family there, we've had a police escort to the cemetery, a hired police escort on a motorcycle, and that was their job, was to get us to the cemetery more safely by alerting everyone around that we were coming. But it is a hired service. So you may think that the police will attend a funeral and escort them to the service if we call them. And you would be wrong. If they have an emergency call, they're not going to be available for a funeral procession. So one town I used to work in, we would call and say, hey, we're going to be coming through the main light in town to head to the cemetery around this time. If you're able, could you block traffic for us? It's just a nice, helpful thing. It keeps everyone a little safer. But if they're called out on another call, we don't have them. So it's a if they're available and give them a heads up. So the police are not always available for that. But in larger cities and in different areas, you can hire a funeral escort. So these are 9 things maybe you didn't realize were additional costs that get added into the funeral bill that are outside the funeral home charges. What other additional costs can you think of that you've encountered to alert everyone to and to share? Drop those in the comments. Can't wait to hear what you guys have to say. Bye.